Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and One Night. Now, when it was the 629th night, she said, "It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib saw his brother in the clutches of the Ghul, he cried out, saying, O the favour of Ibrahim, the friend, the blessed one, whom Allah keep and assain, and drave his charger at Sidon, shaking his mace till the rings loud rang. Then he cried out again, God is most great, and smote the Ghul on the flat of the ribs with his mace, whereupon he fell to the ground insensible, and loosed his grip on Sahim. Nor did he come to himself ere he was pinioned and shackled. When his son saw this, he turned and fled. But Gharib drove steed after him, and smiting him with his mace between the shoulders, threw him from the horse. So they bound him with his father and brethren, and halting them all with ropes, hauled them all six along like baggage camels, till they reached the Ghul's castle, which they found full of goods and treasures and things of price. And there they also came upon 1,200 Ajib men of Persia, bound and shackled. Gharib sat down on Sidon's chair, which had aforetime belonged to Sasa bin Says bin Sadid bin Ad, causing Sahim to stand on his right, and his companions on either hand, and sending for the Ghul of the mountain, said to him, How foundest thou thyself, O accursed? Replied Sidon, O my lord, in the sorriest of plights, for abasement and mortification, my sons and I, we are bound with ropes like camels. Quoth Gharib, It is my will that you enter my faith, the faith of all Islam height, and acknowledge the unity of the all-knowing King, whose all might created light and night and everything. There is no God but he, that the requiting King, and confess the mission and prophethood of Abraham the friend, on whom be peace. So the Ghul and his son made the requirement profession after the goodliest fashion, and Gharib bade loose their bonds, whereupon Sidon wept, and would have kissed his feet, he and his sons, but Gharib forbade them, and they stood with the rest who stood before him. Then said Gharib, Hark I, Sidon, and he replied, At thy service, O my lord. Quoth Gharib, What are these captives? O my lord, quoth the Ghul, These are my game from the land of the Persians, and are not the only ones. Asked Gharib, And who is this with them? And Sidon replied, O my lord, there is with them the princess Fake Taj, daughter of King Sabur of Persia, and 100 damsels like moons. When Gharib heard this, he marveled and said, O Amir, how came ye by these? Replied Sidon, I went forth one night with my sons and 5 of my slaves in quest of booty, but finding no spoil in our way, we dispersed over wilds and wolds, and fared on hoping we might happen on somewhat of prey, and not return empty-handed till we found ourselves in the land of the Persians. Presently we espied a dust cloud, and sent on to one of our slaves, who has absent a while, and presently returned, and said, O my lord, this is the princess Fake Taj, daughter of Sabur, king of the Persians, Turkomans and Medes, and she is on a journey attended by 2,000 horse. Quoth I, Thou hast gladdened us with good news. So could we have not finer loot than this? Then I and my sons fell upon the Persians, and slew of them 300 men, and took the princess and 1,200 cavaliers prisoners, together with all that was with her of her treasure and riches, and brought them to this our castle. Quoth Gharib, Hast thou offered any violence to the princess Fakir Taj? Quoth Sidon, Not I, as thy head liveth, and by the virtue of the faith I have but now embraced. Gharib replied, It was well done of thee, O Sidon, for her father is king of the world, and doubtless he will dispatch troops to quest of her, and lay waste the dwellings of those who took her. And whoso looketh not to issue, and hath not fate to friend. But where is the damsel? Said Sidon, I have set apart a pavilion for her and her damsels. And said Gharib, Show me her lodging, whereto Sidon replied, Hearkening and obedience. So he carried him to the pavilion, and there he found the princess, mournful and cast down, weeping for her former condition of dignity and delight. When Gharib saw her, he thought the moon was nearing her, and magnified Allah, the all-hearing, all-seeing. The princess also looked on him, and saw him a princely cavalier, with valor shining from between his eyes, and testifying for him and not against him. So she rose and kissed his hands, and then fell at his feet, saying, O hero of the age, I am under thy protection. Guard me from this Ghul, for I fear lest he do away my maidenhead, and after devour me. So take me to serve thine handmaidens. Quoth Gharib, Thou art safe, and thou shalt be restored to thy father, and the seat of thy worship. Whereupon she prayed that he might live long, and have advancement in rank and honour. Then he bade unbind the Persians, and turning to the princess said to her, What brought thee forth of thy palace to the wilds and wastes, so that the highway robbers might make prize of thee? She replied, O my lord, my father and all the people of his realm, Turks and Damalites, are Magians, fire-worshipping, and not the all-powerful king. Now in our country is a monastery called the Monastery of the Fire, whither every year the daughters of the Magians and the worshippers of the fire resort at the time of their festival, and abide there a month, after which they return to their houses. So I and my damsel set out as of wont, attended by 2,000 horse, whom my father sent with me to guard me. But by the way, this Ghul came after us, and slew some of us, and taking the rest captive, imprisoned us in this hold. This then is what befell me, O valiant champion, whom Allah guard against the shifts of time. And Gharib said, Fear not, for I will bring thee to thy palace and seat of thy honours. Wherefore she blessed him and kissed his hands and feet. Then he went out from her, after having commanded to treat her with respect, and slept till morning, when he made the wazoo ablution, and prayed a 2-bow prayer, and the rite of his father Abraham the friend, on whom be peace. Whilst the Ghul and his sons and Gharib's company all did the like after him. Then he turned to the Ghul and said to him, O Sidon, wilt thou not show me the Wadi of Blossoms? I will, O my lord, answered he. So Gharib and his company and Princess Fake Taj and her maidens all rose and went forth, while Sidon commanded his slaves and slave girls to slaughter and cook and make ready the morning meal, and bring it to them among the trees. For the giant had 150 handmaids, and 1,000 chattels to pasture his camels and oxen and sheep. When they came to the valley, they found it beautiful exceedingly, and passing all degree. And birds on trees sang joyously, and the mocking nightingale trilled out her melody, and the cushat filled with her moan the passions and mansions made by the deity. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 630th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Gharib and his merry men and the giant and his tribe reached the Wadi of Blossoms, they found birds flying free, the cushat filling with her moan the mansions made by the deity, the bulbul singing as if 'twere human harmony, and the merle, whom to describe tongue faileth utterly, the turtle, whose plaining maddens men for love ecstasy, and the ringdove, and the popinjay answering her with fluency. There also were trees laden with all manner of fruitery, of each 2 kinds, the pomegranate, sweet and sour upon branches, growing luxuriantly, the almond apricot, the camphor apricot, and the almond Khorasan height, the plum, with whose branch the boughs of the mibboln were entwined tight, the orange, as it were, a crest flaming light, the shaddock weighed down with heavy freight, the lemon that cures lack of appetite, the citron against jaundice of sovereign might, and the date, red and yellow bright, the especial handiwork of Allah the Most High, of like of this place enamoured poets. When its birds in the lake make melody, the lorn lover yearneth its sight to see. 'Tis as Eden, breathing a fragrant breeze, with its shades and fruits and rills flowing free. Gharib marvelled at the beauty of that wadi, and bade them set up there the pavilion for Fakir Taj, the Kosarite. So they pitched it among the trees, and spread with rich tapestries. Then he sat down, and the slaves brought food, and they ate their sufficiency. After which quoth Gharib, Harkai, Sidon, and quoth he, At thy service, O my lord. Hast thou aught of wine? Asked Gharib. And Sidon answered, Yes, I have a cistern full of old wine. Said Gharib, Bring us some of it. So Sidon sent 10 slaves, who returned with great plenty of wine, and they ate and drank and were mirthful and merry. And Gharib bethought him of Medea, and improvised these couplets. I mind our union days when ye were nigh, and flames my heart with love's consuming low. By Allah, ne'er of will I quitted you, but shifts of time from you compelled me go. Peace and fair luck and greetings thousandfold to you from exiled lovers' pining woe. They abode, eating and drinking, and taking their pleasure in the valley for 3 days, after which they returned to the castle. Then Gharib called Sahim and said to him, Take 100 horses, and go to thy father and mother and thy tribes, the Banu Qahtan, and bring all this place here to pass the rest of their days, whilst I carry the princess of Persia back to her father. As for thee, O Sidon, tarry thou here with thy sons till I return to thee. Asked Sidon, And why wilt thou not carry me with thee to the land of the Persians? And Gharib answered, Because thou stolest away King Sabur's daughter, and if his eye fall on thee, he will eat thy flesh and drink thy blood. When the Ghul heard this, he laughed a loud laugh, as it were the pealing thunder, and said, O my lord, by the life of thy head, if the Persians and Medes unite against me, I would make them quaff a cup of annihilation. Quoth Gharib, 'Tis as thou sayest, but tarry thou here in fort till I return to thee. And quoth the Ghul, I hear and I obey. Then Sahim departed with his comrades of the Banu Qahtan for the dwelling places of their tribes, and Gharib set out with Princess Fakir Taj and her company, intending for the cities of Sabur, king of the Persians. Thus far concerning them, but as regards King Sabur, he abode waiting his daughter's return from the monastery of the fire, and when the appointed time passed, and she came not, flames raged in his heart. Now he had 40 wazirs, whereof the oldest, wisest, and chiefest was hight Daytan. So he said to him, O minister, verily my daughter delayeth her return, and I have no news of her, though the appointed time is past. So do thou send a courier to the monastery of the fire to learn what has become of her. Hearkening in obedience, replied Daytan. And summoning the chief of the couriers, said to him, Wend thou forthright to the monastery. So he lost no time, and when he reached it, he asked the monks of the king's daughter, but they said, We have not seen her this year. So the courtier returned to the city of Isbanfur, and told the wazir, who went into the king and acquainted him with the message. Now, when Sabur heard this, he cast his crown on the ground, tore his spirit, and fell down in a trance. They sprinkled water upon him, and presently he came to himself, tearful-eyed and heavy-hearted, and repeated the words of the poet. When I far parted, patience called the tears. Tears came to call, but patience never hears. What, then, if fortune parted us so far? Fortune and perfidy are peers and fears. Then he called 10 of his captains, and bade them mount with 1,000 horses, and ride in different directions in quest of his daughter. So they mounted forthright, and departed each with his 1,000, whilst Fakir Taj's mother clad herself and her women in black, and strewed ashes on her head, and sat weeping and lamenting. Such was their case. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 631st night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that King Sabur sent his troops in quest of his daughter, whose mother clad herself and her women in black. Such was her case. But as the regards of the strange adventures of Gharib and the princess, they journeyed on 10 days, and on the 11th day appeared a dust cloud, which rose to the confines of the sky, whereupon Gharib called the emir of the Persians, and said to him, Go learn the cause of this, and come forth. I hear and obey, replied he, and drave his charger till he came unto the cloud of dust, where he saw folk, and inquired of them. Quoth one of them, We are of the Banu Hatal, and are questing for plunder. Our emir is Samsan bin al-Jarrah, and we are 5,000 horses. The Persian returned in haste, and told their saying to Gharib, who cried out to his men of the Banu Qahtan, and to the Persians, saying, Don your arms. They did as he bade them, and presently up came the Arabs, who were shouting, A plunder! A plunder! Quoth Gharib, Allah confound you, you old dogs of Arabs. Then he loosed his horse, and drove at them with the career of a right valiant knight, shouting, Aloha Akbar! Ho, for the faith of Abraham the friend, on whom be peace! And there befell between them a great fight, and sore fray, and the sword went round and sway, and there was much said and say, nor did they leave fighting till fled the day and gloom came, and when they drew from one another away. Then Gharib numbered his tribesmen, and found that 5 of the Banu Qatan had fallen, and 73 of the Persians. But of the Banu Hatal they had slain more than 500 horse. As for Samson, he alighted and sought not meat nor sleep, but said, in all my life I never saw such a fighter as this youth. Anon he fighteth with the sword, and anon with the mace, but tomorrow I will go forth on champion-wise, and defy him to combat of twain in battle plain, where edge and point are fain, and I will cut off these Arabs. Now, when Gharib returned to the camp, the Princess Fakir Taj met him, weeping and affrighted for the terror of what had befallen, and kissed his foot in the stirrup, saying, may thy hand never wither, nor thy foes be blither, O champion of the age. Alhamdulillah, praise to God, who hath saved thee alive this day. Verily, I am in fear for thee from yonder Arabs. When Gharib heard this, he smiled on her face, and heartened and comforted her, saying, fear not, O princess. Did the enemy fill this wild and wold, yet would I scatter them by the might of Almighty Allah. She thanked him, and prayed that he might be given the victory over his foes, after which she returned to her women, and Gharib went to his tent, where he cleansed himself of the blood of the infidels, and they lay on guard through the night. Next morning the 2 hosts mounted, and sought the plain where cut and thrust ruled sovereign. The first to prick into the open was Gharib, who drave his charger till he was near the infidels, and cried out, who is for jousting with me? Let no sluggard or weakling come after me. Whereupon there rushed forth a giant Amalekite of the lineage of the tribe of Ad, armed with an iron flail, 20 pounds in weight, and drove at Gharib, saying, O scum of the Arabs, take what cometh to thee, and learn the glad tidings that thy last hour is at hand. So saying, he aimed a blow at Gharib, but he avoided it, and the flail sank a cubit into the ground. Now the Badawai was bent double with the blow, so Gharib smote him with his mace, and clove his forehead in sunder, and he fell down dead, and Allah hurried his soul to the hellfire. Now Gharib charged and wheeled and called for champions, so there came out to him a second, and a third, and a fourth, and so on until 10 had come forth to him, and he slew them all. When the infidels saw his form of fighting and his swashing blows, they hung back, and forbore to fare forth to him, whereupon Samson looked at him and said, Allah never bless you, I will go forth to him. So he donned his battle gear, and driving his charger into midfield, went and fronted the foe, and cried out to Gharib, saying, Fie on thee, O dog of the Arabs! Hath thy strength waxed so great that thou shouldest defy me in the open field, and slaughter my men? And Gharib replied, Up, and take blood revenge for the slaughter of thy braves. So Samson ran at Gharib, who awaited him with broadened breast and heartened, and they smote at each other with maces, till the 2 hosts marveled, and every eye was fixed on them. Then they wheeled about in the field, and struck at each other 2 strokes. But Gharib avoided Samson's stroke, which Rek had broke, and dealt him a buffet that beat in his breastbone, and cast him to the ground, stone dead. Thereupon all his hosts ran at Gharib as one man, and he ran at them, crying, God is most great, help and victory for us, and shame and defeat for those who misbelieve the faith of Abraham the friend, on whom be peace. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 632nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Samson's tribesmen rushed upon Gharib as one man, he ran at them, crying, God is great, help and victory for us, and shame and defeat for the miscreant. Now when the infidels heard the name of the all-powerful king, the one, the all-conquering, whom the sight comprehendeth not, but he comprehendeth the sight, they looked at one another and said, What is this say that maketh our side muscles tremble, and weakeneth our resolution, and causeth the life to fail in us? Never in our lives heard we aught goodlier than this saying, adding, Let us leave fighting, that we may ask its meaning. So they held their hands in the battle and dismounted. And their elders assembled and held counsel together, seeking to go to Gharib and saying, Let 10 of us repair to him. So they chose out 10 of their best, who set out for Gharib's tents. Now he and his people had alighted and returned to their camp, marveling at the withdrawal of the infidels from the fight. But presently, lo and behold, the 10 came up, and seeking speech of Gharib, kissed the earth before him, and wished him glory and lasting life. Quoth he to them, What made you leave fighting? And quoth they, O my lord, thou didst affright us with the words thou shoutest out at us. Then said Gharib, What calamity do ye worship? And they answered, We worship Wad, and Sawa, and Yagas, lords of the tribe of Noah. And Gharib, We serve none but Allah Almighty, maker of all things, and provider of all living things. He who it is who created the heavens and the earth, and established the mountains, who made water to well from the stones, and the trees to grow, and feedeth wild beasts and wold. For he is Allah, the one, the all-powerful Lord. When they heard this, their bosoms broadened to the words of unity faith, and they said, Verily, this be a Lord high and great, compassionating and compassionate. Adding, What shall we say to become of the Moslems, of those which submit themselves to him? Quoth Gharib, Say, There is no God but the God, and Abraham is the friend of God. So the 10 made versus profession of the veritable religion, and Gharib said to them, And the sweet savour of all Islam be indeed established in your hearts. Fare ye to your tribe, and expand the faith to them, and if they profess, they shall all be saved. But if they refuse, we will burn them with fire. So the 10 elders returned, and expounded all Islam to their people, and set forth to them the path of truth and creed, and they embraced the faith of submission with heart and tongue. Then they repaired on foot to Gharib's tent, and kissing ground between his hands, wished him honor and high rank, saying, O our Lord, we are become thy slaves, so command us what thou wilt, for we are to thee audient and obedient, and we will never depart from thee, since Allah hath guided us into the right way at thy hands. Replied he, Allah abundantly requite you. Return to your dwellings, and march forth with your good and your children, and forego me to the Wadi of Blossoms, and the castle of Asasa bin Shays, whilst I carry the princess Fakir Taj, daughter of Sabur, king of the Persians, back to her father, and return to you. Hearkening and obedience, said they, and straightway returned to their encampment, rejoicing in all Islam, and expounded the true faith to their wives and children, who became believers. Then they struck their tents and set forth with their goods and cattle for the Wadi of Blossoms. When they came in sight of the castle of Shays, Sidon and his son sallied forth to them, but Gharib had charged them, saying, If the Ghul of the mountain come out to you and offer to attack you, do ye call upon the name of Allah the All-Creator, and he will leave his hostile intent and receive you hospitably. So he would have fallen upon them. They called aloud upon the name of Almighty Allah, and straightway he received them kindly and asked them of their case. They told him all that had passed between Gharib and themselves, whereupon he rejoiced in them, and lodged them with him, and loaded them with favours. Such was their case. But as regards Gharib, he and his escorting the princess fared on 5 days' journey towards the city of Isbanir, and on the 6th day they saw a dust cloud. So Gharib sent one of the Persians to learn the meaning of this, and he went and returned swifter than a bird in flight, saying, O my lord, these be 1,000 horses of our comrades, whom the king hath set in quest of his daughter, Fakir Taj. When Gharib heard this, he commanded his company to halt and pitch the tents. So they halted and waited till the newcomers reached them, when they went to meet them, and told Tuman, their captain, that the princess was with them. Whereupon he went into Gharib, and kissing the ground before him, inquired for her. Gharib sent him to his pavilion, and he entered and kissed her hands and feet, and acquainted her with what had befallen her father and mother. She told him in return all that had betided her, and how Gharib had delivered her from the Ghul of the mountain. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And so do I cease the telling of these tales until it be morrow.